Which joining us this morning on the phone, Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, good to have you with us. Good morning.
Good morning.
This entity list is the story of the day. Now China's urging the U.S. to remove those entities from the blacklist. Why did the administration do this right when talks were going to begin?
Because I don't think these matters have anything to do with trade. These are companies that are responsible for two things. First, they pose a national security threat to the United States. They're part of a vast surveillance state capability that the Chinese are building through commercial entities. And they're selling these products all over the world, and they use it to gather data, which is what's going to be the key to the 21st century in multiple industries. And so their presence in the United States is problematic from a national security standpoint. The other is the role they've played in setting up this large-scale systematic system of human rights abuses against Uyghurs and other religious ethnic minorities in Xinjiang. So this is not a trade matter. This is a national security and human rights matter, and that's why these companies find themselves on that list.
So how does it impact the trade matter, which is something obviously a lot of our viewers are thinking about?
Well, it might impact the trade matter, but that can't really be a factor for us. In essence, we cannot put ourselves in a position of saying we're going to allow you to compromise our national security and we're going to allow you to go around the world and conduct these egregious human rights violations because it's good for getting a trade deal done on the broader matters. And we just have to be able to separate the two. I mean, the trade deals are not very good if they require you to give in or jeopardize your national security or your values as a nation.
Yeah, Senator Rubio, I mean, there's a lot on the line here. I think longer term, if you pay attention to defense and weapons hardware. I'm wondering what you think of the parade, the military parade we saw in China for the 70th anniversary last week. A lot of attention given to the missiles, but we saw a number of autonomous systems, including a stealth combat drone that were displayed. And so when you're talking about technology and you're talking about AI capabilities, it goes much broader beyond commercial or consumer uses, right?
Well, that's right. But beyond it, I would say that you look at some of those advances, to their credit, are indigenously produced. I mean, they have increased their capability of making some of these things on their own and made huge advances on their own. They also steal these things. I mean, we see case after case in which they have gotten their hands on sensitive U.S. technology, either by bribing someone or by hacking into something or by planting researchers at our institutions or by capturing a downed aircraft and reverse engineering, or in many cases because of companies who are doing business in China and have to joint venture with one of their companies and helps them reverse engineer processes there. So they have made advances in military weaponry and in military hardware and capabilities that also pose a national security threat to the United States. And I think the parade is perhaps the most visible example of it. But for those of us who have followed this has been evident for some time.
Senator, you've also positioned the listing of foreign stocks in the U.S., Chinese stocks, but other foreign stocks, as a national security issue. If they're not giving the same amount of information, following the same standards as U.S. stocks, I'm wondering what you think is a realistic timeline for saying that other companies outside the U.S. need to follow those standards and giving them time to start following those standards.
Well, first of all, the Chinese have said they will not follow those standards. In fact, they prohibit it. And the second is almost every other company in the world, other than those who are headquartered or come from China, follow those standards. Look, U.S. capital markets...
So this really is about China, you would say?
Well, because they're the ones that behave this way. Our capital markets are the deepest, are the most liquid in the world, but we have high standards for disclosure and transparency in order to protect investors from fraud. And it's very simple. If Chinese companies want access to U.S. capital markets, they should follow our laws the way American companies have to follow their laws over there. That's why the financial side of the U.S.-China relationship in these terms has not gotten enough focus. They have reaped enormous economic rewards while exploiting our openness and our freedom as of the U.S. Global order, led order, and it can no longer allow authoritarian government to reap the rewards of American and international capital markets while avoiding financial disclosures and basic transparency that place our investors and our pensioners at risk.
You've been writing about this for a long time now, and I wonder whether it's today the report about limiting the number of China stocks in government funds, delisting actual Chinese companies, restricting the IPOs. Which of those things is most likely, do you think?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know which one's the most likely. I hope they all begin to happen. I think the entity list is a good step. I think looking at how the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board makes decisions is important. That's something that could happen fairly quickly. But I think this matter of disclosure and transparency is really a matter of financial security. We've got the investors who need to be protected from fraud, who have no insight into these companies and are taking tremendous risk because these companies don't follow the same standards that all these other publicly traded companies do, including other multinational and global companies who are being sold in our market. So I hope they all happen, but I think obviously the entity list was the one that I thought they could move off quickest. And
finally, we've spent the last couple minutes talking about China as a national security threat. You were asked whether the president really meant it when he said they should help him investigate the Bidens. You said he was just trying to bait the press. Do you stand by that? And if you don't, why should we consider China such a threat and also accept their help when regarding a political opponent?
Well, a couple things. Number one, I don't think what he said was right. I don't agree with it, but I don't think it's not there's a difference between a serious proposal and a comment made out in the lawn there in the White House. I'm not telling you it's an appropriate comment. I'm just saying that's not going to happen. That's not actually something that's going to happen. These things are actually happening.
How do you know,
if
Senator?
That changes, well, and if it changes, then I'll be all over it. Like if tomorrow you tell me that there's actually, the administration is actually working on a plan for the Chinese to get their hands on Joe Biden or anybody for that matter, I'd be all over that and against it and outraged. But that's different from an offhand comment made as part of a pattern that's been going on now for 4 years. I've been watching this now up close for 3.5, 4 years, where he says something, everybody gets their hair on fire, and then we spend 48 to 72 hours focused on that. That's not a real proposal. It's an offhand comment, an inappropriate one, but not a real proposal or a real initiative that's undertaken. These other things are actually happening.
Can you sympathize with pool reporters who have to now decide whether this is a, quote, offhand comment or a policy statement by the President of the United States?
Absolutely, because I think we live in an environment today that's driven, frankly, news today is, and I'm not criticizing the news, it's what it is. It's a fact. It's driven by generating clicks and viewers, and what generates clicks and viewers is controversy and outrage. There's no doubt. I sympathize with having to chase this tail every single day. Every single day, something gets introduced into the narrative, sometimes as early as 6:30 or 7 a.m. in a tweet, and then everybody spends all day running around with their hair on fire until we start all over again tomorrow. Meanwhile, we've got a bunch of things that are actually going on in the world that deserve attention as well. And I think for someone in my position, you have to make a decision. Am I going to become a daily participant in the outrage of the day, or when are we going to have time to sort of, on my end of it anyways, focus on what's actually happening? Like the thing in Syria is actually happening. These threats from China is actually happening. These things deserve a lot of attention and sometimes get lost in the daily noise.